Hello and welcome to the Project Aliana Virtual Mental Health Forum. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Mise Johns and I'm part of the project coordination team alongside Kathleen Malaka. Project Aliana is a youth-led initiative co-created by Nigel Adams and Y4Y Quebec to contribute to suicide prevention and mental health in the Nunavik region. This forum has been a long time coming, and we're so happy to be sharing the highlights from our interviews with a sample of distinguished Indigenous leaders and professionals on the topics of mental health, Indigenous engagement, and building resilient communities. Over the next hour, we will hear from Arlene Laliberte, PhD in psychologist and community well-being consultant, Crystal Martin-Lapenskie, president of the National Inuit Youth Council, Scott Wabano, ambassador of hope at We Matter, and Sarah Midanik, president and CEO of the Gord Downie and Chani Wenjack Fund. These individuals were so generous as to share their energy and insights about the picture of Indigenous mental health in Quebec and Canada, and their visions for a bright future and how to achieve it.
Thanks for the introduction, Mise. I'm Kathleen, the other project coordinator. Just to give you a little picture of the region that we're talking about, Nunavik occupies a third of the province of Quebec, stretching more than 500,000 square kilometers north of the 55th parallel. With a population just short of 15,000, 90% of the people identify as Inuit, and they live across 14 primary communities between the Hudson Bay, the Hudson Strait, and the Ungava Bay. In addition, Nunavik actually has one of the youngest populations in Canada, with nearly 2/3 under the age of 35. These remote communities face a number of challenges, including overcrowded housing and poor infrastructure, as well as food security, just to name a few. And while they have continued to gain attention at both the provincial and national level, access to mental health services has been front and center for more than a decade. The ITK have identified suicide as the biggest threat to Inuit people and culture in Canada. In 2016, they released a nationwide strategy geared at helping communities address the various social and economic inequalities which compounded have contributed to Inuit people experiencing the highest suicide rates in Canada. This public health crisis is particularly cumbersome for Inuit in Nunavik, a region that is poorly serviced and where access to appropriate and culturally relevant help continues to be an issue for individuals in distress. Over the past couple of years, though, grassroots collectives have mobilized to address the needs of their communities. From regional conferences and specialized trainings to cultural revitalization and localized support systems, the Inuit of Nunavik have been at the forefront of advocacy. Youth have been especially important in building resiliency with their peers and with their communities. With social media, younger generations are finding new ways of connecting by sharing their experiences, ways of overcoming challenging situations, and by bringing attention to the changes that they want to see.
Hello, my name is Susieanne Kudluk. I am from Nunavik, Quebec. I am 22 years old and I am an acting coordinator of the youth center. So what I'm here to talk about is the mental health resources that we have up north. There are some mental health resources that we have, like the social workers, the nurses here. As far as that goes, that's basically all we have. We have a psychiatrist that comes here twice a year, one for Ungava and one for the Hudson Bay. There are 2 psychiatrists that goes up north twice a year, and there are a lot of mental health issues. There are a lot of people with mental health issues that don't get the chance to use the resources that we have, which are pretty scarce. Just to give you guys a little update on our community, which is of 600 people. This is a community of 600 people, and it is Gangsuk. Since the COVID-19 pandemic has happened, there has been a rising of mental health issues that have went unnoticed, especially with the youth. Not a lot of youth know that they can use these resources to their benefit. And what I would like to see more of in the mental health resources like the social workers and the CLS is to put it out there more, get a social platform more, try to reach out to youth more. And yes, they do that, but they don't do that as often. And I would really love to see them interact with the youth more. I'm not saying that they don't, but you know, there could be improvements on their services, especially putting it out there, like the FM, the social networking, just like all around, just like get it out there that there are mental health resources that they can use, or yeah, something like that. Well, just a little update. We recently opened up the daycare, which was back in August, and in September we recently started opening up the school. The youth center has been open since August. Like everywhere else, it is mandatory for everyone to wear a mask, social distancing, and often washing your hands with antibacterial soap or just water and soap. So that's a little update on our community and the mental health issues that we face here are real, and they are here, regardless if anyone sees them or believes them or not. They are here, and we do have a lot of issues. And what I think that we could do to help young people with mental health issues is just get it out there. Get the resources out there, make them know, let them know that there is help out there. And in my experience of being an animator and a coordinator of the youth center, all young people really want is to be heard and for someone to listen to them and take account for their feelings. So I just wanted to let everyone know, all the youth know, that there is hope and that mental health is really important, and that should be really important to you. And I wanted to let you know that there is hope, and then you can get help. But the first step starts with you. Reach out to a friend or a family member or a social worker. Well, my name is Susieanne Kudluk. I am from Nunavik, Quebec. I am 22 years old, and I really hope this finds you well.
So a little more context. This initiative began last year when Y4Y Quebec's president and treasurer met with project co-founder Nigel Adams at the 2019 Bishops Forum. Seeing that change was happening at a very slow pace, many youth began advocating and telling their stories. Nigel was one of them. After hearing him speak about his life and experiences in his home community of Kangiksuyuak, they were moved to do whatever they could to help and be part of the solution. Since that meeting a little over a year ago, we have teamed up with a group of young Indigenous leaders to create programming and promote Indigenous mental health in Quebec and contribute to the surrounding dialogue. With the help of the Nunavik Regional Board of Health and Social Services, we've created a community mental health resource guide for the Nunavik region and a policy brief on Indigenous mental health that will be featured in a training manual for new police officers working in Nunavik. We're also proud of the many connections we made with amazing Indigenous-led and focus organizations along the way. And we're happy to see our youth forum, once canceled due to pandemic restrictions, come to fruition as a virtual event. Our goal today is simply to amplify the voices of these experts and youth, to hear their insights and offer a window into the Indigenous experience in Quebec and Canada, the associated challenges, and the path towards a bright future. We are so lucky to have had the opportunity to learn from such generous spirits, and we hope that you will find their words as insightful and constructive as we did. If you liked what you saw and would like to see more, we invite you to check out the full interviews on our page at facebook.com/Project Aliana. So before we begin today's presentation, I would just like to take a moment to urge anyone struggling with their mental health to seek help. Dealing with mental health issues is a normal part of life, and as dire as it may seem in any particular moment, there is always action to be taken, and there are many examples of people who were once where you are today and have turned it around, and you can too. If you or someone you know is struggling with a mental health issue, no matter what it is, there is always someone to help or somewhere to turn, and making a simple phone call can make all the difference. Being proactive about one's mental health is a reflection of a person's strength and resilience, full stop. So please, reach out to someone you trust and seek professional help. There are new online services that you can sign up for right now, and they'll pair you with a counselor with experience in dealing with your particular issue. It is so important that we all stay proactive about our mental health. If you would like to speak to someone right now, please call the number on the screen. If you are in the Nunavik region, please have a look at our mental health resource guide to find the right service for you. You can find that at nunastrong.com. So with that said, please turn your attention to the insights and wisdom of our wonderful guests. Allow their words to resonate and inspire. Oh, and stay tuned for a special performance by the angelic Angela Amarualik at the end. Thank you. What would you say are some key ways for people in general, but specifically Indigenous people, to build their mental health personally and communally?
I think first off, it's important for everyone to recognize that they have strengths, they have qualities. And it seems so almost silly to say that, but at one point in your life, if you've been struggling and if you're in survival mode for such a long time, you can lose sight of your own potential, of your own inner qualities. And so that is what I bring into my work as well. I use a positive psychology approach to understand mental illness and well-being. So mental health and well-being, that are two different things. And I also look at shining the light on the strengths. And so if a person has been struggling, they're still here. And I think just making that observation, you're still here. What have you been doing that has been working? And sitting and looking at those aspects with them. So it doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter if you're suicidal, if you have addiction problems, if you've been to jail, you still have strengths, you still have qualities. And it's not only okay, but it's important to recognize those. And so maybe on a more macro approach, deficit focus, it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. We've been deficit focused and intervening in that way forever. And so I'm working really hard to change the way that we're intervening in mental health and work on the strengths. And even if someone has a chronic mental illness, for example, schizophrenia or borderline personality disorder, they still can achieve well-being within themselves. And so it's really respecting, for me, it's respecting the people that I'm working with. It's respecting their rhythm. It's not me coming in and saying, "Ooh, you have to do this or that." It's really, let's look at what have you been doing so far that has been working.
That's really interesting. And I know that's good advice for anyone. I mean, even just myself hearing it right now, it's helping me, anyway, but, and not to simplify it, but it's like, just focus on the positive, because it can be so easy to kind of lose sight of everything that's working. And I don't know, for myself, I just assume it's a perfectionism, but no, I think that's very, very insightful.
Question, I was wondering if you could talk about some of the key issues that Inuit youth are talking about from the West Coast to the East Coast in urban centers or more remote areas. What are the things that they'd like to see be addressed at the national level?
Of course, suicide prevention is a priority of NIYC. That is what has been brought forward to us by Inuit youth across Inuit Nunanga. The great thing about this era right now, and to be living in this era, is that Inuit youth have been so vocal. And it's so like empowering and impactful to see so many Inuit youth that are taking strides and leadership to combat some of these issues and have these tough discussions with their community leaders, the regional representatives, even on the national stage. There are so many Inuit youth that are coming forward and talking about this and demanding change. So it's definitely a great era to be in. You know, another thing as well, like I was thinking about this question was, there's so many youth across the globe that have always been vocal, that have always essentially used their voice. But what I've found is like the media hasn't really amplified their voices until recently. So now, you know, on the news and within, you know, newspaper articles, you're seeing, you know, youth that are stepping forward, that are taking center stage, that are providing, you know, way forwards or strategies of what to do or what to focus on. And it's being shown now, but youth have always been vocal. It's just a lot more prominent now because the media is like, oh my goodness, look at this.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the differences in how mental health affects genders. So, for example, so I don't know if you have any insight into that. But.
Well, to me, I know each individual, whether they're a man, woman, non-binary, trans, two-spirit, everyone requires a specific type of care. Not every human is going to get the same treatment. That's not how mental health should work, just because our human brains are wired differently. Like everyone's brain is different. And throughout our communities, our Indigenous communities, because we're so isolated and, you know, there's such a high turnover rate, there's counseling services that are available, but they're very basic. And they also focus on a very Western dominated type of medicine. A medicine that us as Indigenous people, we're not used to. We're still getting used to it, you know. I also find that's why there's such a big problem, a big disconnect from our culture and our people, and why there's so a high drug and alcohol abuse levels within our communities is because the medicine that's available for us within our communities is very Western dominated and something that we're not used to. And there's always talks about, you know, like the brain and the psychology and the childhood behavior. And but as Indigenous people, we've always had our traditional teachings that were kind of robbed from us because of colonization and, you know, the effects of residential schools and whatnot. And that was removed from our way of life. And, you know, as Indigenous people, we are very spiritual people. We've always been. Before colonization happened, before the settlers came, we're always connected with our spirits, and we've always followed the teachings of the four medicines, the four directions. You know, we've always taken care of our mind, our spirit, our body, and our heart, because that's something that we were always taught. But it wasn't until, you know, when settlers came and colonization happened, we kind of those supports were removed from our way of life. And, you know, as a two-spirited person, I received different teachings and different support than I would compared to a cis straight male white guy, just because I'm two-spirited, and what my needs are for my soul and for my spirit, it's different than a guy who is cisgendered and straight and white. And I think it's just pairing those, it's finally bringing in traditional medicine within our Indigenous communities and bringing in traditional healers or medicine men and working together on how we could better provide more cultural-based healing and more land-based healing, because I know a lot of Indigenous people we love being on the land. Like there's something healing about just being surrounded by Mother Nature. And since COVID happened, I noticed a lot of Indigenous people have been going out the land and been seeking that land-based healing just because of all the resources that were kind of robbed or taken away due to COVID. So yeah, I think it's that. I think it's because of Western medicine, and if we incorporated more traditional types of healing within our communities, I think that's when we'll lean towards more healing and we'll bring more positivity and light to our communities. That's very much needed during this time.
What kind of resources, for example, actions or support systems, are needed to facilitate the changes that youth want to see in building more resilient communities in the North?
I think it's the answer is in the question. Let's build resilient communities. I love my job. I love going to different communities and working with the youth or the families and doing that direct work. But what I prefer to do is actually work with the workers, build capacity within the community, value the workers. I think it's very, very sad to see, yes, I'm a professional and I do want a fair wage as a professional, but someone who is a social and emotional well-being support person in the community that doesn't necessarily have a formal formal schooling, but that have the know-how, that have the wisdom, that have the experience, why would we not treat them and value them like a professional that we brought in from outside of the community? So I think and I'm speaking for myself and gaining from looking back at my own journey, decolonizing our own mind. Because unfortunately, with colonization brought internalized racism, it also brought lateral violence. And these are the effects of colonization that we are also fighting today amongst ourselves. But recognizing our own strengths as individuals, but also the strengths in our communities. Because there are and there have been those pillars in the community. Let's work with them and build their capacity and support their confidence and support their ideas and the work that they're doing. Instead of, as well as relying on outside resources. So kind of let's put our money where our mouth is and build our strengths within our communities.
Can you say anything about the differences in services in urban versus rural areas?
Yeah, so like I said, living in an urban area, it's more stable. It's more permanent. It's more stable. I guess you could say, like the therapist that I've seen, I've been able to see since I've moved here in Toronto, and she hasn't changed one bit. Like the therapist, there's no high turnover rate here. Whereas if I lived in an isolated community, I basically went through like 4 therapists within like a 6-month span just because of the high turnover rate, and they travel to different other communities. So it's just like a rotation of therapists. And, with me personally, building up trust takes a lot of time. And, having to do that with a therapist continuously new and just opening up these old wounds and opening up these triggers. And I felt like I wasn't healing from my trauma or healing from my issues because I was just constantly reopening it back up and just explaining it over and over and over and over again. And whenever I would make progress or whenever I felt like I was on my way to, starting this new life, like this new journey of being healed, I would immediately be knocked back because either my therapist was gone or, she left the community and was gone for maybe like 3 weeks. Like I wouldn't have I wouldn't have anyone to talk to, I guess you could say, for like that 3 weeks. And it obviously affected my mental health. But now that I've moved here to Toronto and just having that stable connection and that stable environment, not only that too, but having a therapist that knows traditional teachings and incorporates traditional knowledge and traditional medicines within our counseling sessions, that's definitely helped me more. 1 month of that helped me more than 6 months of all those therapists did. And I think that's something that speaks volumes. We need more permanent, more stable mental health support systems in isolated communities, especially with an emphasis on incorporating traditional knowledge within it, because leaning towards that is what helped me kind of, better my mental health and want to become better. And it just motivated me more to provide more traditional knowledge programs within our communities so I could help youth. I know that if I had these services made available for me while I was living in the communities, my mental health would probably be really good right now. But because of that, because we are leaning towards this movement of youth finally taking matters into their own hands, like, I have a lot of faith for our communities, and I'm really excited to see our youth becoming more involved and demanding what they want and fighting for what they want and actually getting what they need for their communities. It's beautiful.
And I was wondering if there are young people that are looking for inspiration or motivation, would you have something to say to them? What would you say to them?
It's really hard, just when it comes to inspiration, it really has to be something that you're passionate about. So what I would say is really, if you're looking for motivation, you really need to ask yourself some questions. You need to better understand yourself. Essentially, how do you feel about it? How do I feel about this? What can I do about it? What areas can I contribute? It could be small, it could be large, or it could be just a gesture of sharing on social media, for example. And also kind of asking yourself, who can help me? What are my support systems? What's available out there? But, and it's so hard, especially if you're trying to find initiatives or to try and combat certain issues within your community, because there's just so many different red tape also involved, and there's so many ways of being able to navigate. And it's like, you go to one area and you're shut down, you have to go to this area, and it's just a lot of back and forth. And my advice really would be just to not give up. The times, the amount of times that you're going to run into an issue or run into times where you're feeling completely hopeless and helpless. But those feelings pass. And a lot of it has to do with more, digging, just trying to find more information, trying to gather more people, because the more people that you have supporting you and being your ally, the more ideas you can generate. And the more ideas you can generate, the bigger the picture can get. And then you're able to kind of outsource some other ways as well. But for me, it's always that $1 million question. If I had $1 million, what would I do? Right? And how can I get there? And it doesn't have to be something simple. Like, it can be just this wild idea that you have. And no idea is a bad idea. So it's just a matter of, okay, well, how can I get there? What steps do I have to take, kind of thing. There's been this On the Land program initiative since COVID happened. And the On the Land initiative is essentially you get funding from your regional Inuit association. And I think it varies by region, but there is funding available depending on the region, so that you can self-isolate for 14 days. Okay. And so you would get all of your materials that you need, food that you need, anything that you would need to be able to survive out on the land for 14 days. And almost everybody has been accessing this. And we've heard nothing but great things come out of this as well, and the importance of having the On the Land initiative. It has improved mental stability. It has improved cultural connections and land connections, and like you said, family and friend connection as well. I think this On the Land program initiative has really proved to be detrimental in terms of mental healing as well. And a lot of Inuit youth being able to have that opportunity to learn different traditional skills as well, and hearing and seeing different ways, surviving essentially. They're fishing more, they're hunting more, they're getting more country food. And it's just, I've heard nothing but great things about this initiative.
A term that's become something of a buzzword of sorts in recent years. And I know you touched on it, but would you mind giving a definition for those who still may need clarity?
Reconciliation has a very different meaning to every individual and every organization. I would say that reconciliation is a journey and a willingness to engage in dialogue and action that creates a stronger, healthier relationship between all inhabitants of this country we now refer to as Canada. I would say even just engaging in activities like listening to this recording today, reading a book by Indigenous authors, listening to Indigenous musicians. When you're looking at news headlines, and, there's such a sensationalized sort of feed within the news stream around missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, violence against Indigenous women, land claims. What does that mean? Where do those issues stem from? Developing a deeper understanding of some of the systemic systems within this country, starting with the residential school system and obviously colonization, that have continued to contribute to where we are today. There's a lot that needs to be done to develop space to hold conversations that you feel comfortable to lean into subjects that might be difficult to discuss. You might not know a lot about it, and being able to ask those hard questions. We found that earmarking physical space to incorporate Indigenous presence within an organization is a beautiful way to kind of start that conversation. Sometimes that means having a land acknowledgement, if that's meaningful for your work and your organization and it's done in a proper and respectful way. That can be really significant. Sometimes that means, inviting Indigenous communities into the conversation or into the event. Sometimes that means, taking a step outside of your comfort zone and learning more or engaging with Indigenous partners that you may not have considered before. So I really think that, it really starts with being willing and open to taking that next step to engage and to learn more to ensure that, it's a meaningful and reciprocal relationship and interaction when engaging.
What connection do you see between reconciliation and creating resilient communities and or in addressing mental health?
I think acknowledging the hard truths and acknowledging the continued impacts of the past is a crucial first step in being able to address healing and mental health. I mean, I think about where we were even just 5 years ago, where, reconciliation or holding space for Indigenous perspectives or voices wasn't even, a blip on the conscious mainstream. We've come a long way in furthering this conversation, but there's so much further to go. And I mean, we're so focused on ensuring that the next generation of young Canadians understands the true history of what happened in this country. You can't address the intergenerational trauma and the effects of residential schools without even understanding that they existed in the first place, and understanding the continued impact of residential schools and how that, you know, has constructed systems like child welfare and justice and the over-representation of Indigenous peoples in those systems.
I was hoping you could share your thoughts on the importance of addressing our history as a country as it pertains to the well-being of Indigenous communities.
For sure. I think, you know, one of the things that we should always be conscious of is using our history and the hard parts of what's occurred in the past to influence and change our actions for the better in the present and in the future. So how can we ensure that we're not repeating mistakes of the past? And how can we ensure that, you know, future systems that are being put in place aren't oppressive and are coming from a strength-based approach led by Indigenous communities and leaders and members being able to advocate and receive what they need.
What kind of changes would you like to see at the governmental or community level in order to improve cross-cultural understanding?
Well, ideally, I'd like every kiddo in school to learn about Canada's true history, and in my dream world, holding proper space for Indigenous history, not just the impacts of colonization, but a strengths-based acknowledgement of Indigenous ways of knowing should really be incorporated into both our education system and governance systems. I think this would create deeper appreciation and understanding and value and appreciation for Indigenous worldviews and cultures. And I think the more Indigenous voices and the more Indigenous representation that we have both within government and educational bodies that can help influence this will continue to improve that cross-cultural understanding.
How you envision the future for Inuit people in Canada?
The way that I see it is self-determination. I think Inuit are on a really great path. Inuit youth and even current Inuit leaders, you know, not just from the regional perspective, but community leaders and community members. There's just this, it's not like the hope is there. There's always been hope, but now like you can kind of start to see these little things that are kind of happening and popping up here and there. And you're just like, wow, that's happening. Wow, that's happening. And so with these different things that are going on, it's just so empowering to see that, you know, the future of our people and our communities is going to look much different than it is now because of active individuals across Inuit and Nunavik that are taking steps and taking strides to improve their communities. So I really, you know, in the future of Inuit, I really see, you know, the self-determination so much more stronger than it is now. And I see so many that are working towards building their communities the way that they envision it as well. I'm very, very fruitful and excited to see what the future holds for Inuit, especially since so many of them have, you know, taken the lead on their own. They're not, like you said earlier, you know, they're not just the ones that are leading people, they're the ones that are also working silently.
Yeah.
And so I'm just really super excited to see what the future holds for Inuit. And I do see a really great future ahead as well.
how can youth keep motivated as they wait for adequate and appropriate services to be presented?
I want to say, don't wait. Advocate. I want to say, go to school. Yes, we can view university, for example, as a colonial sausage machine. Everybody comes in different, everybody comes out the same. There are exceptions. But I mean, an education opens doors. And I've considered myself as a translator for many, many years, in the sense where I was working with communities, and we'd identify an issue with the community, and they wanted to, let's build a program, or let's try and get funding to address these issues. And so I would sit with them and I'd write up a grant. So basically speaking government language. And that's what I'm saying, translation, where how can we address this issue and get the funders to understand what we're doing. And unfortunately, yes, Aboriginal Indigenous people are oppressed. There is ongoing colonization, but it is also up to us to educate ourselves, to decolonize ourselves, and to find resources to continue to fight the system, to change the system. It's not easy. We need allies, but I would say don't wait. Advocate, make the best choices that you possibly can for yourself, for your own life. And if you want to change the situation, change yourself.
Listening to them is very vital. I find a lot of our youth feel like they're not heard. They're basically always telling the government, telling our leaders, telling their parents, telling anybody really on their needs. And it's up to, the government, it's up to us to listen and to understand what they need, and to motivate them and to encourage them that what they're doing is great work. That's definitely something that's been helping me. I know there are days where I feel like the work that I do is like, it's not doing anything. Like the work that I'm putting in, I feel like it's not going anywhere. Like nobody's listening to me. Like my leaders don't listen to me. My leaders don't want to have a meeting. Like there's always these thoughts that go through my head. But then it's always my elders, my knowledge keepers, my parents who provide that encouragement and, who provide that motivation to me, to ensure me that what the work that I'm doing and the work that other youth are doing, it's going to benefit our future generations. And this is something that our people have been speaking about for generations now. And, we had these whole prophecies about the seventh fire prophecy, and that prophecy is coming to life now. And you could see it with all these Indigenous youth fighting for what our community needs and what their needs are too. And it's definitely helps when we're being heard and we're being listened to, and our everything's being taken seriously. Because a lot of us, we kind of grew up where if we express something, a lot of people would be like, oh, it's because it's your age. Like we go through that, it's your age, like you're not wise enough. And it kind of just disregards their feelings or disregards whatever they're going through. Just because of their age, it does not remove the fact that they went through what they went through and that they need what they need in order to better themselves. And so I think just being more encouraging, listening, and always having an open mind, that's definitely what's going to keep our youth motivated to better fight for these resources needed for our communities.
It's in the words of Gord Downey when he called us all to do something. And it seems so simple, just do something. But really it can be as simple as, taking that first step, whether it's visiting our website, whether it's watching The Secret Path, whether it's Googling whose land you're on, whether it's learning how to do a land acknowledgement, learning how to smudge. There's really no wrong first step. The important part is, getting to a place where you're willing and intentional about taking that first step. And there's a role for all Canadians on this journey towards reconciliation, and we all have a responsibility to get involved. And all I can say is reach out, get connected to the work we do, and don't be afraid. There's, reconciliation can seem like what do they call them? The big, hairy, sort of overarching themes of, how do you really pin it down? What is my role? What can I do? It's do something, really just engaging in the movement and learning more, and we'll get there.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you found this to be interesting and useful. As we know, mental health is a delicate, complicated, and yet important topic. If you didn't find what you were looking for today, please keep searching. There is always more resources out there that could make the difference. And lastly, be proactive, not just about your mental health, but in your relationships and community as well. Find out how you can tap in and become a positive influence on those around you. Now, please enjoy Angela Amarualik.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Angela Amarualik, and I will be singing a song called A Friend Like You. It is a song to send a message to my friends, how lucky I am to have them, and without them I wouldn't be here. With them always willing to give me their time, and yeah, it's a friend like you. Thank you, Kuya Namik.